Hey everybody, welcome to the Firefighter Deconstructed. This is Christy Warren, your host. Welcome back and Happy New Year. I took a few weeks off just to recover and have a little break from all things PTSD. But I'm back, the Firefighter Deconstructed is back, and I am very excited to be back. So we're going to have some new stuff coming out, so please stay tuned. Please check out the website, firefighterdeconstructed.com. The book section is new. There's some new books on there and an easier way to find those books. So please check it out. And like I said, other new stuff will be coming out as well. So this week we have Ryan Dedmon. He is the Outreach Director at the 911 Training Institute. I'm just going to read you his bio here. Ryan Dedmon started his law enforcement career in 2002 at the Anaheim Police Department. Ryan served in different roles, first as an intern, then as a police cadet, and finally as a police communications operator. Ryan was working in dispatch communications in 2008 during the Freeway Complex fire, which burned over 30,000 acres in 3 different counties. That's got to be a logistical dispatcher's nightmare. In 2012, the Southern California chapter of the Association of Public Safety Communication Officials International named him Telecommunicator of the Year, the organization's highest honor for public safety dispatchers in Southern California. And since the population is so big down there, I imagine there's quite a few dispatchers down there. So that's actually pretty significant. After retiring in 2013, Ryan served as a subject matter expert and the communication specialist for the 911 Wellness Foundation until the organization dissolved in 2017. Ryan currently serves as an outreach director in the 911 Training Institute, a consulting firm that provides unique mental health expertise and call mastery training for public safety dispatchers. He also coordinates an advanced officer training program at the Regional Criminal Justice Training Center at the Golden West College in Huntington Beach, California. Ryan blends his education and experience behind the console to help dispatchers and police officers battle acute stress and post-traumatic stress. And he knows what he's talking about because he's got a pretty good story to tell. So let's go talk to Ryan and hear his story. This is the Firefighter Deconstructed. Here we talk about the human inside the uniform. This show is for first responders and those who care about them. Ryan Dedmon, welcome to the Firefighter Deconstructed.
Thank you very much, ma'am. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
Thank you, sir, for being here. So you used to be a dispatcher.
I did.
And you now work to help dispatchers.
I do.
So why don't we start off with you and tell me a little bit about your story.
A little bit about my story. That is so loaded. So loaded.
It is so loaded.
I'm sure that's what all your guests say, right?
Yes.
So I come from law enforcement, and I apologize ahead of time to all my brothers and sisters of the Thin Red Line, but I never did any fire dispatching or EMS dispatching. I was law enforcement only.
Okay.
So now you can judge me, I know, and let the jokes fly. It's okay. You're not going to hurt my feelings. You're not going to hurt my feelings.
I think dispatching I've never been a dispatcher, but dispatching for fire and EMS has got to be way easier than for cops.
Yeah, well, so you're in Northern California. I am your neighbor down in Southern California. I live in Orange County, and I started my law enforcement career in 2002 as just a college intern. I was still in college at the time. I was a senior and I needed an internship to graduate. And, I strolled into the lobby of the Anaheim Police Department in Anaheim, California, because it's one of the biggest agencies in the county where I live. And I thought, well, surely they must have plenty of work that they need done. And they're probably itching for someone to do it for free, right? So enter the little college kid. And I did an internship with the gang division for 6 months.
Oh, wow.
And it was awesome. And everything I experienced during that internship made me fall in love even more with law enforcement. And I thought that's what I wanted to do. And this internship proves it. This is what I want to do with the rest of my life. And during that internship, my very first background investigator became a mentor of mine. And
Mm-hmm.
I found it really funny because, I thought as a little college intern, I could just, stroll through the lobby and say, hey, put me to work. And little did I know, I'd have to go through a thorough background check just to
Mm-hmm.
work for free and volunteer. Well, this is new to
Mm-hmm.
me because I don't have family in law enforcement or fire services or EMS or anything. So this was new to me. And so the relationship I developed with my very first background investigator became a very organic mentorship, if you will. So I finished my internship, and then the department hired me to be a cadet, which is like a step below police officer. And I got to work some really cool assignments during that time. I put myself
That's
through
neat.
the police academy because at that time, the state of California went on like its first budget freeze. This was back when
Oh, okay.
I think Schwarzenegger was governor at the time, and he had just taken
Mm-hmm.
over and was trying to do a lot of economic reform, and public safety agencies, government agencies overall were just frozen. No one was hiring. And
Yeah, I remember
so,
that. Yeah.
yeah, I'm sure it impacted fire and EMS as
Oh,
well.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, the advice given to me was, hey, put yourself through the police academy. That way, by the time the state recovers and these government agencies start hiring, you'll be good to go. And instead of them having to put you through, you'll be ahead of the game. Made sound sense. So I put myself through the police academy and graduated. And upon graduation, the communications manager approached me and said, hey, I want to promote you to be a dispatcher.
Oh, wow.
And I thought, I had been told, like, if you want to work out in the field, almost in any capacity, don't go work in dispatch, because all you do is sit
Mm-hmm.
and you gain, like, the freshman 15 all over
Yeah.
again.
Yes.
And all of this physical fitness you've worked so hard to develop to work your role out in the field is just,
Mm-hmm.
that's going to vanish. But I said, hey, it'll be a good experience. So I became a dispatcher. I did that for about 8 months at the city of Anaheim. And then I left Anaheim to go to another neighboring agency here in Orange County to be a police officer. And I hated it. I hated it.
Really?
Yeah. Not the agency. The agency was very good to me. But the
Hated the
experience of
job?
working, the experience of working out in the field, I found out was just, I was not cut out for it like I thought I was. And I was
Wow.
not enjoying it. And thankfully that agency was very gracious and helped me realize some aha moments, if you will. And I was like, you know what, I can't see myself doing this for 20 years. Like, I don't want to chase after people. And like, when I chase them, like, I don't want to fight. I'm not a very big guy. Like, I don't.
Yeah.
And after, rolling around in the mud, the blood, and the beer a couple times, I was like, no, thank you. I gracefully bow out. And, the day after I resigned at that agency, Anaheim said, hey, come back and be one of our dispatchers because we are so short staffed.
Yeah. Yeah. They're always short staffed.
So I said, you know what? Yeah, sure. I'll come back and be a dispatcher. And it'll be one of those things I do in the meantime until I figure out what I want to be when I grow up now.
Right.
And of course, in the blink of an eye, nearly 8 more years went by.
Yeah.
So the troubling thing with my career is that when I returned to Anaheim to be a dispatcher, my mentor had been assigned to work in dispatch because she had been diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer.
Oh, Jesus.
So in my 4-month leave of absence at working at another agency, I come back, she's working in dispatch because they put her on a modified light duty working assignment because she couldn't work out in the field anymore because she
Mm-hmm.
her body was experiencing the devastating toll of chemo and other various types of cancer treatments. And so here she is, and she was a cop's cop, had been around the block a few times and had the stories to prove it. And now you got her chained to a desk in dispatch, and she hated it. But I start working it side by side, at consoles that are next to each other with your mentor, and it was awesome. And and anyone in fire services and EMS too who've ever experienced that type of mentor relationship and public safety,
Yeah,
that's got to be
absolutely.
like one of the most powerful brother sisterhood relationships you can experience in your
I
work
so
life.
agree. I really agree. Yeah, absolutely.
So I did that with her for about 6 months, 8 months.
Mm-hmm.
And then in June of 2006, the department found out that she died by suicide. She was at home one day and
My
just
God.
decided she obviously had had enough, was fortunately losing her battle with breast cancer. And, you know, that was the decision that she made. And
Wow.
I didn't take that very well due to my professional and personal relationship with her. I didn't
Mm-hmm.
handle that very well. And this was back in 2006. So, you know, things in public safety that exist now, like peer support and, you know,
Right.
competent clinicians
Yes.
who can relate to the job that we do in public safety, like those people, those systems just didn't exist for us back then.
Right.
And so the attitude in law enforcement, I'm sure like it was in fire services, just suck it up. And that was the emotional code that I live by. And so I pressed forward instead of really dealing with the thoughts and emotions I was having at the time and wrestling with her death. Full steam ahead, 100 miles an hour.
Mm-hmm.
And I got to do some really cool things in my career as a result. But looking back now, I can see that I was doing those things to distract myself from really introspectively having to address the things that I was still wrestling with.
What kind of things did you do?
So I started doing things that dispatchers typically don't do. I
Uh-huh.
started showing up at neighborhood watch meetings
Oh,
and
wow.
business
Mm-hmm.
district meetings with, you know, like a community service officer. I
Mm-hmm.
talked to residents in the city about the 911 emergency system, what happens when they call, what they can expect, our line of questioning protocols. Did a lot of 911 education out in the community. I started showing up at schools with fire dispatchers. And we would do a song and dance with McGruff, the crime dog, or Sparky, the fire dog, you know, and
Sweet.
we would put on a circus and a show for kids and assembly presentations teaching kids about 911. And we started an awards program for children who called 911 and did an extraordinary job acting as a reporting party, requesting police, fire, or EMS.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know, I was like, it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun. And you know, I went back to school. I got a master's degree. Um, I was
What did you
just
get your
like
master's degree in?
forensic psychology.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah, so I like, you know, I was just trying to do anything to keep myself busy. That's the best
Mm-hmm.
way I can describe it, you know, and
Yeah.
it's like you know, having your shoes on and having an itch at the bottom of your foot, and you're like stomping your foot and you're like twisting it and turning it to try and to try and scratch that spot, but you can't
Mm-hmm.
get it because your shoes are on. And that's
Right.
the best way I can describe like what it felt like. I was just like, hey, what else can I do? Overtime, sign me up. Community events, no problem. I'm there. Like, what else? How much more active can I be? You know, and I lasted, yeah, about 8 years until 2013. And in the spring of 2013, I handled a suicide call. And the completion of that suicide call, in my mind, was so similar to the way that my mentor had done
Wow.
it so many years earlier. It like instantly reawoke all those thoughts and feelings, like she had just died yesterday, you know, but it had been nearly 8 years. And yeah, it was crazy. It was crazy. And I pressed on though, you know, I made it. It happened in the middle of my shift. I made it through the rest of my shift. No problem.
Yeah.
I called out sick the next day. I don't even know why, because I was a workaholic. But then, you know, the day after that, I was mandated overtime. So I went right back to the grind, right back to work. And then I lasted 6 months until Halloween 2013, when I took another one. And this is probably the worst suicide call I took in my career. And it messed me up. You know, the
Yeah.
walls that I felt like I had done such a good job at building to protect my heart and mind from the stuff that I hear and, you know, the stuff that field responders see. We do that. But that call like instantly made those walls crumble. And, you know, I'm, that happened at the end of my shift. And, you know, I say I don't remember driving home, but I know that when I got there, I wasn't sure if I wanted to like hit something or curl up in the fetal position and cry. And for lack of a better psychological term, I had a breakdown.
Mm-hmm.
And at about 2:00 in the morning, I said, something's wrong. I called a supervisor at 2 a.m. and I said, hey, good morning to you. I don't know what is going on, but something's wrong. And I don't even know why I'm calling you right now, but something's wrong and I don't know what to do. And he said, hey, we're fully staffed the rest of this weekend because this happened on a Thursday and I was scheduled to work through Sunday. We're fully staffed the rest of the weekend. Take the rest of the weekend off. I said, you know what? Yeah, I'm going to take you up on that. Well, 3 days went by and I hadn't slept, which is, weird for me because, if you could see this face, this needs 10 hours of sleep a night in order to look like this, right?
I totally can see that.
So for me not to sleep, that's weird. And then 3 days went by and I hadn't eaten. And, you can't see me, but I am built like a greyhound burning calories as we speak. I am already thinking about what's for breakfast tomorrow morning. So for me not to eat and me not to sleep, I got a master's in psychology. I can see the red flag warning signs that are clearly flying high and presenting themselves. A week went by and I hadn't returned to work. 2 weeks went by, I hadn't returned to work. And I found myself pacing back and forth in my living room, asking myself the question in public safety that we never ever should. What if? And I would just torment myself with that question, asking, what if I would have done something differently or said something differently that would have changed the outcomes of that suicide call? And then I don't know about you, Kat, but like these calls, they just started to like melt and mold in my head because I would think about the one on Halloween and all of a sudden my brain would jump back 6 months prior and thinking about the one I handled in the spring. And then suddenly that would take me back years and years earlier and thinking about my mentor. And it just became like a storm of nonsense.
That's a good way to put it. A storm. That's a really good way to put it.
Yeah. I could not control what was going on up in my head or, in my heart. And the city, I had a meeting with human resources at the city and they said, hey, what do you want to do? Because we don't have any other open civilian position to which we can transfer you in the department right now. So do you want to go out on short-term disability? And I said, short-term disability, I'm doing the math in my head. Like I was 34 at the time. I still have 30 years of my life left to work if I'm lucky. Thank you, public employees retirement system. Short-term disability, that label, that stigma, that would just follow me the rest of my life. I would never work again, certainly not in law enforcement or in public safety. So I say short-term disability, if that's your best offer, I respectfully decline. And I voluntarily resigned overnight.
Wow.
4 months went by and I was not in a good place at all. Alcohol became my medicine. Whiskey was my drug of choice. I would shoot whiskey until I blacked out. And when I say blacked out, like I mean drop dead on the ground, pass out, blackout. I would come to and I would go run 10 miles because I'm a runner by nature. I would go run 10 miles and I'd come back and more whiskey, go run whiskey. And that was the only way that I could figure out to have like my body be physically racing at the same pace that my mind was, because I still could not shut this off. And, I was in a very dark place. Now, I never had any suicidal ideations. I never wanted to intentionally hurt myself or kill myself, but I was in a dark place and I was on a very self-destructive path that was going to end in a dead end sooner or later.
Right.
And then I got a phone call out of the blue from a mental health professional who had prior been contracted with the department to do like victim witness advocacy. And she connected me with a trauma therapist who specialized in working with first responders. And so I went through several months of counseling, talk therapy, as well as eye movement desensitization reprocessing, EMDR.
EMDR.
And it saved my life. And it took the better part, probably close to a year, before I finally felt like I was healthy again, because I was now back in control of everything that was going on in my
Yeah.
brain and in my heart.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was my law enforcement career.
Wow.
Shortly after therapy, I joined the staff of a police academy here in Orange County and started teaching training classes. First for dispatchers, because that's my background. But then due to my personal experience with that, but then also my education, I was asked to help coordinate a crisis intervention team training program, which helps public safety responders come together on the continuum of care
Mm-hmm.
to provide best care and service to people suffering from mental illness. And I did that for about 5 years before that program ended earlier this year. Now I work uh, since 2016. I've had the pleasure of working as the outreach director for the 911 Training Institute, and we provide advanced training classes for dispatchers, specifically related to stress resilience. That is
That's
our bread.
awesome.
That is our bread and butter. So we help do training classes for dispatchers and then partner with public safety agencies, specifically 911 agencies, in helping their agency build a peer support team to support their employees.
That's fantastic. Oh,
Yeah.
I'm so happy to hear there's something like that out there for dispatchers. That's really awesome. When you were in your deep dark place and you said you didn't feel suicidal, but did you feel like if something happened to me and I died, it'd be just fine?
Yes, I think you could describe it like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I certainly can't speak for others who have been intent about suicide. But for me, it was never an intentional act to hurt myself. It was like unintentional. It's like, hey, this excessive drinking
Mm-hmm.
is not good. But like if I didn't wake up after drinking all this whiskey,
It'd be fine. Yeah, it'd be okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so then I think the reasoning logic in your brain starts not with, hey, I want to intentionally hurt or kill myself, but it probably
Right.
starts with, hey, if I'm gone and I'm not here anymore, like, is the world gonna know?
Mm-hmm.
And that's the hard part to really process, because I have
Yeah.
an extended family and I had friends, a network. I had social support systems at the time in place, which is one of the things we encourage first responders to
Yeah.
develop as a safety mechanism. I had that in place, but I was not tapping into that as a resource to help me during that time.
I think it's also hard because I had just tremendous support around me too when I was going through mine. But nobody, as much as they loved me and cared about me, could turn that shit off in my head, where, like you said, the alcohol and, the running, I did the same thing. I ran and drank, and that stuff, did shut it down. And, then like you say, you need to see the mental health professionals because they teach you how to shut that stuff down. And, so yeah, and I think a lot of people say, "Oh, well, I'm not suicidal, and not, I'm okay," even though they have that feeling of, "Well, if I didn't wake up tomorrow, it'd be fine." And that's something to recognize as a sign that things are not going well for you.
Definitely. That is not something that you can just brush under the front door, Matt,
Right.
as
Exactly.
some fleeting thought. That is
Right.
the cliff beginning of a very long slope
Yeah.
that's going to take a dramatic drop off.
Yes. Very dramatic.
And the significant impacts of that aren't just going to be on you, but it's going to be on obviously all of those people who love and care about you.
Yeah, that's the other side of it is the devastation that it leaves behind. So many people will think. I know I thought that. Everybody would be better off without me because I'm causing so many problems right now. But it's couldn't be further from the truth. It's so devastating. So
And
can
I don't
Go
know
ahead.
about you in fire services, but like for me, on the 911 side, a part of that also was looking at my peers who still worked in 911
Yes.
and judging or making the comparison between where I'm at now and where I perceive that my peers should see me at. And when, those paradigms don't align, now it's like, okay, well, clearly I'm a failure because I have not lived up to, the unspoken expectation and culture of public safety and being the big, bad warrior mindset. None of this stuff gets to us, and we're not impacted or affected at all by the horrific scenes that we respond to and handle. And I think a part of my identity crumbled as well. Because certainly you can relate, right? Like thin line, thin gold line for dispatch, thin blue line for cops. Like when you're removed from that, we spend so much time and energy investing in our professional identity that I think we forget that, at the end of the day, it's just a job. A calling, yes, definitely, but it's still just a job that pays your bills and helps you support your family. Nobody cares
who you are. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, nobody cares if captain is not a captain anymore. If Christy's not a firefighter anymore, if Ryan's not a dispatcher anymore, nobody cares about that. What they care about is who we are as persons, and that was also a very challenging thing to reconcile in my head.
Yeah, I hear that story so many times, and it's funny you say that because I used to say the same exact thing. I say, okay, there's 125 other uniformed firefighters here, and I'm the only one that can't seem to handle and do my job. So there must be something pretty wrong with me. So yeah, so many people feel like that. Well, that's kind of the point of this podcast, is to get the word out. And I don't know what happened with you, but when I got better and I got to the point where I could go back to my department and talk to people about what had happened, boy, the phone calls and the texts I was getting, like, hey, can we go get a beer? I've been feeling kind of crappy. It's just like all the people struggling just came out of the woodwork, and it's like you just have no idea what's going on.
And why do you think that was for you in your conversations and contact with them? What was it? Because they could relate? They knew you could relate?
Yeah, I think it's, I made myself vulnerable, and I went and I told my story, and, and like I said, and like you said, they can relate, and they know that they could talk to me and not be, judged. And because I had just told them my entire story. And yeah, it was amazing how many people I found out were really struggling too.
Yeah. There are so many people in public safety who silently suffer on the front lines in the trenches because they feel like nobody gets it. Nobody could ever relate or understand. And two, there's no hope in making it any better.
Right.
And the fact is that, that's not true anymore. It might have been years and years ago,
right,
but it's not true today. And so obviously
everything
you just described and coming back and those people reaching out to you and you meeting up with, like, that is peer support.
Right. I want to focus a little bit in on dispatchers now. Can you talk into some of the unique challenges that dispatchers face? I think everybody sees what police do, and they see what the fire department does because they see us out on the street, and there's lots of TV shows. But I don't think people understand. Even people in the field, there's plenty of cops and firefighters and paramedics that don't understand the unique challenges that dispatchers have.
Yeah. So there are a few. Some of the big ones are, the first is that everyone probably has this misconception that dispatchers are sitting in some type of universal call center somewhere in the middle of Nebraska, and that's where all 911 calls go. And as a result, your dispatcher then, the picture of them is really no different than you calling your credit card company and talking to some type of call taker representative who provides you with customer service. And the fact is that nothing could be farther from the truth. Dispatchers are generally locally based, supporting local city, municipalities, or county fire departments. Sometimes they're consolidated and they dispatch for more than one agency, but that's generally how it works. And as a result, those 911 calls first answered by a dispatcher, it's also important to realize that that dispatcher is the first
First of the
responder.
first. Absolutely. Yes.
Because even on the fire and on the EMS side, that dispatcher is providing commands through protocols that are or can be life-saving measures. And if that dispatcher were not doing that over the phone before firefighters, paramedics, and EMTs arrived, then the outcomes of many of our medical emergencies would be different.
Yeah.
So I think the diminished role that some people perceive dispatchers to have is inaccurate. Dispatchers are first responders, and thankfully a lot of our states in the nation have started to recognize them as such through legislation. Another thing is that, as dispatchers, so what I'm doing answering 911 calls is I am creating a motion picture in my mind's eye of what is actually occurring that is being only said to me over the phone. The problem with doing that is sometimes that motion picture in my mind is not an accurate portrayal of what is actually occurring. So, for example, I can't tell you the number of 911 calls I answered where it sounds like there is a murder in progress. Like there's just hysterical screaming and rustling in the background. And, you type as fast as you can as a dispatcher, you send field responders who arrive. And what do we find out? That, it was an accidental cell phone call and you have two adults who are having consensual sex.
Yeah.
Now that is hilarious now.
Right. But when you're,
in real time, I'm like, all I hear is someone hysterically screaming bloody murder. And so I create this picture in my mind. We do this with every call that we answer, and we create this picture of the worst case scenario. And the reason that we do that is, one, we can provide the best care and service to callers and people who are involved in the incident, but two, so that we can best prepare you as field responders. Because if we put out every traffic collision as just, a fender bender, and then you get there on scene and find out that, you got two that are rollovers and one's fully engulfed with people trapped, like you would have brought different equipment, I would assume. Like you would have done things differently. And so it's better to be over prepared on that side instead of vice versa. And the other problem with dispatchers, one of the unique things we experience is that we don't get the closure that you do out in the field.
I hear that a lot from dispatchers. Yeah.
So, we handle calls and talk to people before field responders arrive. And when field responders arrive, we usually disconnect. And, you as firefighters, police officers, EMS professionals then take over. And we don't always find out or know what happened with that call that I just handled. And I'm curious, like I spent, 10 minutes on the phone with a gentleman who was reporting whatever type of incident. I feel like I'm emotionally invested in this now. And yet, like, kind of wipe our hands clean of it and we're done. Some of the reason for that is because for every call that you respond to as a firefighter, I'm probably answering 10 as a dispatcher.
That's a good point.
So dispatchers go from call to call to call to call to call without that downtime in between, where you may have the opportunity to diffuse, if you will, after some type of event. But dispatchers don't. We're in a communication center answering those calls as quickly as they come in. And so that lack of closure is very troubling for some dispatchers because, imagine reading, the first 10 chapters of a book and then putting it down and not knowing how that story resolves.
Yeah. Is there a way that the departments or municipalities or whatever can help with that? Like, is there some way that, I know you're busy, but that you can read the report or we can give you a report, is there some way to correct that?
Yeah. And obviously for your bigger, your critical incidents, hopefully, departments now are having some type of debriefing, if you
Mm-hmm.
will, where we bring all the parties together and, okay, we're going to talk about this incident because several of us were impacted by this event.
Right.
But your day-to-day routine, quote unquote, routine calls, that's hard, right? And especially if I'm in a communication center and you're in a firehouse, I don't see you. I don't
Right.
ever see you.
Right.
So we're not going to pass in the hallway
Never.
where I can say, "Hey, Cap, like, hey, remember that
Yeah.
call yesterday? Like, what happened?" That's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
So what I tell dispatchers is, "Hey, pick up the phone and call them."
Absolutely. Yeah. I was going to say that. Yeah.
Like I don't think many I don't think many field responders are going to have an issue or a problem with a dispatcher reaching out and say, "Hey, we're curious up here in communications, like what happened with that call an hour ago?" You take a few minutes to share some of the details, and that provides us with the closure that is sometimes needed to
Mm-hmm.
address the thoughts, feelings, emotions that may later cause trouble for us because we can't process it because we don't have the full picture.
Right. Right.
So
But, you know,
that's what I would say to field responders, because in
yeah.
classes with dispatchers, I'd say, hey, call them up. But now to your field responder audience, I'd say, if you handle some type of event uh, that you think your dispatch crew may be impacted by, hey, take a minute and get them on the radio or call them back channel, back door, however you can, and just share that closure with them.
Yeah, that's great. You know, it's funny because when, I wasn't working, I never crossed my mind to let dispatch know what happened. And, our brains tend to, when there's missing holes in stories, our brain will fill it in. And so
Yeah.
that's, and it's what you're talking about, like, you make the worst of the scene in your head, and that's what our brains do. And so that's got to be really hard for dispatch because we see everything, we got to fill all the holes, but you guys don't. And yeah, I think there needs to be so much more communication between dispatch and the field because, I mean, of what we do together. And, we're in the field and we're calling dispatch and dispatch isn't answering. And so we're getting all pissed off and thinking the dispatcher doesn't give a fuck. And, you know what I mean? And then the dispatcher, is like, on some other hellacious call and, knows that you're in quarters and doesn't need to tell you right away. You know what I mean? And I think that if there was more communication, I think it would just help all that so much. Because like you say, we don't pass each other, we don't meet each other. All I knew the dispatchers' names and their voices, and that was it. And it became, well, I should back up a little bit. When I worked on the ambulance, we used to have to call for times when we got to the hospital to fill in our patient care report. And so I felt like I made a connection with those dispatchers because I talked to them, and that became
Regularly. Yeah.
right. And it became like, Kathy the dispatcher and Karen the dispatcher, and or I should say it became Karen and Kathy instead of just, the dispatcher. And so when I talked to them on the radio, I knew it's like I knew they were there. I knew they didn't give a that they the case wasn't that they didn't give a shit, you know what I mean? Or they didn't
Right.
do their job or whatever. And so yeah, I think that would be just so beneficial to have that communication between the
Well,
field.
you nailed it on the head right there, because aside from helping address some of the trauma associated with these incidents, it also just builds camaraderie.
Yeah, exactly. It
Because
puts us on the same team.
yeah, and even though you have a very specific role and function out in the field, your dispatcher in a comm center is no different. And all together, our powers combined. Did I just date myself? Yeah, I did. You know, all of that comes together to provide resolution
Right.
to all of these events that we respond to, because no one of us could do the job without the other. And so that I think
Absolutely.
that sense of camaraderie, that team building, that's what's also important for, job satisfaction, career satisfaction, because now we're building these relationships, and you're not just a voice on the other end of the radio that I hear of a captain who's screaming reference, incident command system that she's working some big thing and asking me all this stuff and making all these demands. Now you're right. I put a person to that. I know. Okay. Got it, Christy. Like, let me get you what you need. let's work together now. And
Right.
I think that changes our attitudes and our
Mm-hmm.
mindsets about our jobs in general. Because let's face it, sometimes being a firefighter, it sucks. Sometimes
Yes.
being a paramedic sucks, being a cop sucks, being a dispatcher sucks. There are bad days that we all have at work. And those relationships that we have are going to help us in the long haul with career longevity and satisfaction, which
Yeah.
just goes into like overall life fulfillment.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, absolutely. Yeah, and I think it's really unique to dispatch because we, like where I worked in Berkeley, we had 125, uniformed personnel, and so I got to know everybody and I saw everybody every day, and it was just all of us, and then even the cops, we saw them on the street and we got to know them, and then there's like 4 people in dispatch, and it was so easy to, make it us against them, and every once in a while, our station would get rung down in the middle of the night, and you know and the dispatch would be like, "Oh, I'm so sorry, it's the wrong station." So what would happen the next day? Like, "Oh, Susie's a fucking idiot. She rang us down last night and woke us all up." And it's like, if you knew Susie really well, you just be like, "Oh, that's silly Susie." You know what I mean? And yeah, and it's so got to be tough for dispatchers to be behind the scenes like that.
Yeah, it can be. But like I said, it's those relationships that make us
Mm.
feel, that job satisfaction and that fulfillment, and it reminds us all of why we chose this profession in public
Mm-hmm.
safety to begin with. And if we can continually remind ourselves of that, we're going to last 30 years. And then
Yeah,
we're going to last, 20 or 30 years beyond retirement, because
yes,
retirement is not the finish line, right?
right.
Because there's too many field responders who make it to retirement and then they have serious health complications within the next couple of years that just has devastating tolls on their livelihood. And there are things that we can do to change that.
Yeah, I think I heard some statistic like the mortality rate for first responders after they retire is like 8 years or something like that. It's really short. What about the aspect, and this is where I always feel like or my interpretation of what dispatchers go through is a helplessness that you guys have to feel of listening to somebody on the radio screaming for help. And it's like, yeah, you can do something by sending units, but you can't like really like actively do anything.
Reach through the phone. Right.
And so if
Yeah,
you could speak to the toll that takes on you a little bit.
well, that helplessness is it can be indescribable at times, because depending on the calls that are reported, you're serious, critical, in progress types of incidents that require immediate response from field responders. That is frustrating beyond measure, because all I can do is talk on a phone or a radio and type on a computer,
Mhm.
when really I want to grab my keys and run down to my car in the back lot right now and respond code 3 with you all to get there and to help.
Yeah.
And dispatchers help in a very different way than field responders. And sometimes it's the sound of the voice that is providing
Hmm.
that calm comfort and giving instructions and commands, pre-arrival instructions to help you all seamlessly take over. And that's where we need to focus on as dispatchers. So we say that helplessness, yeah, trust me, I get it, but there are things that we can strategically do to address that, so that when you start to recognize you're feeling like that, you can almost, reset yourself in real time to help you get through and provide the best care and the best service. And then after the event has concluded, now there are things you can do to follow up, to help give you that full sense, that comprehensive view, that full sense of closure now that your mind, your body needs in order to completely process some of these events.
Yeah. Good advice. Very good advice.
But that sense of helplessness is experienced by you all out in the field as well. It just feels a little different because you are physically on scene.
Right. Yeah. I mean, there's plenty of times, where you feel very helpless, but it's like, at least you're doing something, like, I don't know, somebody's hurting a kid. It's like, we can run and do, you know what I mean? And do everything we can to take care of that kid. And it's like, you guys send us and set us up. And like you say, your job is just as important as all of everybody else's, if not more important. And, but you can't like, you know what I mean? You can't like go there and especially while we're responding. I think that's like, I just got goosebumps thinking about that. Thinking about like while we're responding and you having to, listen to the screams on the phone and listen to the crying on the phone. And that's just got to be brutal.
Yeah, it can be, and different calls impact different dispatchers differently, just like they
Just
do
like,
field
yeah,
responders,
just like
right?
the
So,
field. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I'm not married and I don't have any children, but plenty of my partners were, and so when they would handle those child-related calls, they would be significantly impacted by what they heard, and to where me, not to sound so desensitized, but like that's just another call for service for me because I
Right.
can't relate. So
Right.
it's not that every single one type of call always has one type of impact or result on dispatchers, because we're different. We're just people, and so we experience trauma and stress differently, based on lots of things in life. So it's hard to say that there's any one type of call always creates this one type of emotional response, when the fact is, well, that's not true.
It's just like
Because
the field responders. It's
yeah,
exactly the same way.
and so it's knowing who you are. It takes a great sense of self-awareness to know who you are, the things that trouble you, the things that trigger you, and knowing your partners too, so that when I know, silly Susie is impacted by, it's always going
Uh-huh.
to be Susie,
It's
right?
gonna be silly Susie.
It's always going to be Susie. She's impacted by that child call because she's got 3 kids at home. So
Right.
now I can be more empathetic as her partner, as her coworker, to support her. And that's no different than you guys out in the field
No,
either.
it's
It's it's
it's like,
knowing
yeah,
your crew, right?
listening to you, it's all exactly the same. Yes, it's absolutely the same. So you mentioned earlier about how, states are finally starting to recognize, like officially recognize dispatchers as first responders. Is all that moving fast enough? I mean, it probably isn't, but like the whole mental health peer support thing out in, the fire service, it took forever and it's finally starting to gain some traction and momentum. And I see that like just starting with the dispatchers too. Do you see that like moving quickly, or is there something we can do to move faster? Or
I think it's moving as fast as it can under the
Mhm.
circumstances of 2020.
Yeah, that's very true.
um, Earlier this year, California, where both you and I are at, reclassified dispatchers as first responders in California.
Yes.
But that's different than Arizona, Nevada,
Hmm.
and all of our neighboring states and all the other great states in the nation, right? So a lot of it is left to states. Norma Torres, who is a representative here in California at the national level, introduced a bill called the 911 Saves Act that will nationally reclassify dispatchers as first responders.
Oh,
Um,
fantastic.
Unfortunately, that legislation at the national level has stalled a bit this year, due to several factors, right?
Hmm.
COVID and elections and you name it. So
Yeah.
where that stands nationally in the House, actually, I think it might be over on the Senate side now in one of their subcommittees. I can't say, but I think a lot of other states are starting to recognize that, hey, because it's not nationally recognized, doesn't mean that we as the state of Connecticut can't write some type of state legislature or statute reclassifying dispatchers in our own state. So that's what a lot of states have done in the meantime.
Good. Yeah, that's good to hear. And I like the fact that the bill on the national level, at least it's sitting there. You know what I mean? At least it's there. That's a step
Right.
forward. And then something else I like to address is, first responders in the field. We work ridiculous hours and get mandatory a lot, but I see that happening with dispatch. And I find it very different to be or I would find it very different to be a dispatcher and be working for 24 hours than a firefighter working for 24 hours. It's very different. And I remember so many times when I'd go to work and I'd talk to Silly Susie at 10 in the morning, and then I'd hear her again on the radio at 5, and then we'd get up at 3 and it's Silly Susie still is dispatching us. And it's like, holy shit. And, and then you hear her again, the next day at 3 o'clock.
Right.
And, I don't know what the situations in other places, but in Berkeley, all they could talk about was how short-staffed they were and how often they were getting mandatory. And, this has got to completely screw with their mental health. Is this like a bigger problem, or just like a, here and there problem, or?
So staffing in general is certainly one thing that has plagued the 911 industry for several years.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if there is one specific rhyme or reason for that. Lots of factors come into play on why agencies are short-staffed, but the fact remains they're short-staffed. And, and if we only have 4 dispatchers, but we should have 9, that has serious implications for those 4.
Absolutely.
So, shift work in general is hard. It's hard physically on your body. It's hard mentally. It's hard emotionally. It's hard on your family, your friends, your loved one. It impacts a lot of areas of your life. And then you take irregular hours. When I worked graveyard for several years in my career, and I loved it, but my social life went down the drain. And so it's not just the long hours, it's the irregular hours as well. Because, I get off work at 6:30 in the morning. I'm going to sleep till 4:30 in the afternoon when all the rest of the world is awake. And when I'm finally ready to go out and about and want to do stuff, it's midnight.
Yeah, everybody's shutting down.
Everybody's shutting down. So it's the long hours. The longest I ever worked in my career, I think, was just a little over 16.
Okay.
On regular, the agency where I worked, we had 12.5-hour shifts. And we would often get either mandated to stay over, hold over, or mandated to come in on days off due to some staffing challenges. And then there's things like emergency call out too.
Right.
And in California, you and I experienced challenges with wildfires like no other state in the nation. At a moment's notice, a dispatcher could have a regular day off and get a phone call that says, hey, get in here now.
Yeah, cops and firefighters, same, paramedics, same way. Some incident happened, we need everybody. You got to come to work. Yeah.
Yeah. So those staffing challenges just, it makes the job frustrating. It certainly makes the job frustrating. There's lots of other impacts that have on your overall wellness and your overall well-being as a result. It can suck. What we know now, though, is that there are systems we can develop in place to help address those challenges. So it's not like, okay, hey, you're going to work 16 hours. We have no idea when you're going to get off because we got this major incident. We have civil unrest. We have wildfires, natural disaster, you name it, whatever. Now, after the fact, we know that there are things that we can do to come alongside our employees to provide them with the support and the assistance that they need to make sure that they want to come back to work next week.
Yes.
Instead of like, hey, I'm going to take this job and shove it. Here you go. I've had enough of this.
So what do you think is the next step for dispatchers, within municipalities or counties or wherever, what can they do right now for dispatch?
From the mental health aspect, there are several things that we encourage. One is obviously having a peer support team in place. And with as popular as peer support philosophy is now in public safety in general, I still come across dispatchers, and field responders who work at agencies in other states and in more rural areas who say, peer support, what's that? Yeah. I say, man, if you don't know what peer support is, like, let me fill you in, because you're missing out if you are not experiencing this in public safety. That's one. The next thing we like to have is with that peer support team, we like to have connected with that a mental health professional who is culturally competent in public safety.
Yes.
Like they get 911, they get fire services, they get EMS, and they get law enforcement. So that now when you have a public safety professional talking to that mental health professional, they're not getting that glazed look and response because this mental health professional, is a marriage and family therapist. It's like, okay, that's not the right type of mental health professional I need at this point in time. I need someone who's accustomed to dealing with trauma. So it's also providing some education to the field of mental health and getting more people culturally competent regarding the jobs that we do in public safety so that they can come alongside us and help us in our greatest time of need. Like, when you were experiencing challenges, certainly when I was experiencing challenges, it was a mental health professional who reached out and, helped save me. And then beyond that, looking at a bigger picture, it's things like employee assistance programs in general. For our government agencies, those types of employee assistance programs are great for your clerical staff and your other government workers who are not responding to horrific events.
Yeah.
When you get a firefighter or dispatcher or EMT or cop, it doesn't matter. If you get a public safety professional tapping into some of those employee assistance programs who are not specifically built or designed to address the unique challenges we experience in public safety, then our response in public safety is, well, this isn't helping. No. So now clearly there's no hope for me in changing this. So I'm going to go back to the bottle. I'm going to go back to whatever type of ill coping mechanism I was using to try and address this stuff that I need help with. But now I feel like there's no solution.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Yeah, and we're so prone to saying, "Oh, I tried it once, didn't work, so I'm not going to do it anymore."
Yeah,
that's our attitude. So,
so it's also helping government officials recognize that our jobs in public safety are very unique by our duties and responsibilities, and as a result, we need very unique services to help us.
It's so funny because so many people say that, but the way you said it is just, I don't know why. Instead of just culturally competent thing, unique services that will help us. I don't know, that makes it sound like very much in English that people can understand, and hopefully they will. So Ryan, do you have any last words for all your dispatch homies out there?
All my dispatch homies.
Dispatchers need some love, man.
Dispatchers do need a little love. You know what? I will end with a quick analogy for everybody. How about that?
That sounds fantastic.
Now, okay, you're in Northern California, so you know a thing or two about redwood trees, yes?
Yes, I know quite a bit.
What about redwood trees? What you got?
Well, they grow in like a little circle grove off of like one redwood tree, and then the redwood trees grow off of it, and they stay tight together. They're like a family. They help each other grow. The tannin in their bark doesn't burn very well. They're strong as fuck and they're old as hell. And now they like the fog. Yeah, and their bark, the tannin, it's not only fire resistant, but it's beetle and bug resistant. But I think you're going for the way that they grow together.
Yeah. So when I ask that question, everyone says, well, they grow really tall. I say, absolutely. The coastal California redwood tree is the tallest tree on planet Earth. It grows to a height of just over 400 feet. And if you think about that for a second, 400 feet, there's a tree that's 400 feet tall. That's 100 feet taller than the Statue of Liberty.
Yeah, that's tall.
I mean, there's a tree taller than that's hard to fathom. And you would think that a tree that tall would need a root system that just grew so deep into the ground, wrapping its roots around the core of the earth in order to hold that tree strong and steady, just because of its enormous size.
That's the other thing I forgot to say is their roots are very shallow.
That's it. And just as the opposite with the redwood, because its roots, instead of growing vertically downward, grow out laterally. They intertwine and they fuse with the tree next to it, the tree next to it, tree next to it, and the tree next to it. So that instead of only having a root system that supports one individual tree, now you have this, spider web complex root system that basically supports a forest that blankets most of Northern California. And that is what we need to be for one another in public safety. Because my root system is going to help support you when you need it. Just like yours is going to help support mine when I need it. And it doesn't matter that I'm a dispatcher and you're a firefighter. What matters is that we both answered a calling that we felt in life to serve other people. And in completion of that service, we're exposed to some very ugly stuff. And we need help processing and coping with that ugly stuff so that it doesn't have the negative consequences that we have allowed it to have for so long in the past, so that our firefighters and our cops and our EMS professionals no longer silently suffer on the front lines and the trenches. We come alongside them because we're all one big happy family.
Well, there you have it. I'm speechless. That was awesome. So, Ryan, I can't thank you enough for being on the show and sharing your wisdom and, being here in your time. I appreciate so much what you're doing for first responders and especially for dispatchers. It's awesome.
It is entirely my pleasure, ma'am. I was happy and giddy to receive your invitation. So thank you for your work with this podcast.
Oh, it's my pleasure. All right. Thanks, Ryan. I want to thank Ryan for being on the show. Remember to check out firefighterdeconstructed.com and contact me with any feedback you have. This podcast comes out every Thursday morning, and I cannot thank you enough for listening. And please, please, please remember you are not alone.
Strange things keep happening in her mind. Dreams are blackening her fears, cloud the beauty and the light of each day. Sick to hell of fighting this goddamn fight, and oh, that's the fire that she chooses to live. But she's not broken. No, she is not broken. And she sees the end of the world in her dreams. And she fights back the tears and the screams of the fear, and now she knows your love is around. Don't look down on her. He sees the troops marching in. He knows it's bad news again. And he found loyalty in a stranger's life. He cries for his brother in arms who gave up his life. But he's wide awake on the plane. Why did he survive? But he's not broken. No, he is not broken. And he sees the end of the world in his dreams. And he fights silence I fear. It's my own heart to clear, and I decide when to steer, 'cause I